The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Sonic Web Studios specializes in custom web design, app development, social networking, search engine optimization, domain registration, email marketing, online stores, and more. Since our birth, we have been designing and developing immaculate websites and providing web solutions which are a cut above the rest. As a leading web designing enterprise, we have a team of extremely talented web designers who are well-focused and have the experience of working on multiple web developing platforms such as PHP, Magento, custom WordPress, and more. Sonic Web Studios has been helping businesses of all kinds, whether big, small, established, or startup, impress their audiences with exemplary web solutions. We don't just create beautiful and functional websites. We give you a complete online solution with the main goal of enhancing your yearly revenues. We aim to give your business the online exposure and brand acknowledgement that will help you in achieving increased conversions leading to profitable sales. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
It's now time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Mike brings you great guests and interesting people from all across the globe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another great episode of the Mike Wagner Show.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Looking at a professional website without breaking your budget? Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, along with Amazon, Audible, and over 25 podcast platforms. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel, and follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with a wonderful gentleman who is born in Milwaukee, now based in Southern California. He is one of the most sought-after bass players in music today. He's contributed to over 2,000 albums. He's played with James Taylor, Jackson Browne, Carole King, Phil Collins, James Taylor, Toto, and more. And he also participated in other albums like, say, with Air Supply or the Bee Gees, Roger McGuinn, and Carla Bonoff, Jimmy Buffett, Glenn Campbell, and the list goes on and on and on and on. He's also got a new book out. He's also got a podcast. He's also done some soundtracks, film scores, and I mean, what can I say? This guy is a legend in the bass and rock world. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Plus Studios in beautiful Southern California, ladies and gentlemen, the ultimate bass player, and in the Hall of Fame in my book, Leland Sklar. Leland, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
I am thrilled to be here, and I'm absolutely exhausted already listening to everything that you're doing. It's amazing. I love it. I absolutely love it, man. I'm feeling so much energy and power coming out of North Dakota right now.
Well, that's great to hear. Of course, you know, I've been listening to music for God knows how long. Of course, I'm a huge Phil Collins fan. I love your work. And, of course, James Taylor, Toto, Carole King, Jackson Browne, and oh my gosh, and I think the list just goes on and on. Oh, you know what? I see you got Johnny Rivers, Diana Ross, Jennifer Rush, Cliff Richards, Neil Sedaka, and Anna Gabriel, Vince Gill. The list goes on and on and on. I mean, if we had like 24 hours to do this nonstop, we could do this. However, you know, we're here to talk about some other things. You got a new podcast, you got a new book, and you've done over 2,000 albums, and basically you've just been all over the board, and you're one of the most sought-after bass players there is. And before we get into all that, tell us how you first got started.
Well, first off, I just want to say it's been a remarkable crazy, sad, tragic, wonderful year this year. Watching everything that's taking place with the pandemic and the music community. So for me, it's been really just kind of a surreal year. I mean, I've been playing music since I was 5 years old. I started as a classical pianist, and when I was 12 years old, I went into junior high school, assuming I'd be the pianist. And music teacher said, "We got a ton of piano players. We need a string bass player." And he turned me on to string bass, and I never looked back after that. But it's I feel so fortunate every day that I'm still getting to do the thing that I love the most, and is really what my DNA is all about. And I pinch myself just because I enjoy pinching myself, but I also pinch myself just because I feel so fortunate that I've had the run that I've had, and so much of it is with people that I've have been lifelong friends, and in the community of musicians is pretty spectacular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has to be very spectacular as well, too. And I forgot to mention the section as well, too. That's best well known for Asylum Records, and we'll talk about that. And, of course, it sounds like that, being a bass player, you just got hooked on as well, too. And who are some of your favorite artists and musicians and singers growing up for you?
That I've either listened. Do you mean listening to or having played with?
No, listening to when you like in your younger days, growing up.
Yeah. Oh no, I was really fortunate that I grew up in a very eclectic musical household. So my folks had a great record collection of everything from Mozart and Beethoven to Martin Denny to great jazz albums. All kinds of stuff. So I listened to as much as I possibly could. By the time I was in junior high and in high school, I was listening to like a lot of R&B. Loved R&B, so I listened to a lot of Joe Tex, James Brown, Otis Redding, but I loved like the Righteous Brothers. I used to practice to all of those people. And that was kind of where I developed my playing, was playing along with, I would sit with my bass in front of my parents' hi-fi and put these records on and play along with them. And it was a great education. Even though I had formal education, that was really where I developed my real passion about playing. And then, of course, the corner was turned when the Beatles arrived in America, and when I wrapped my head around that, I was off and running, and fell in love with that entire, like so many players, the English invasion as they time in music. So I was trying to absorb everything, styles within that, but that whole period of Hendrix and Vanilla Fudge and Cream came and played in my college gym. I sat there in 1968 watching them playing in the gymnasium, and it completely blew my mind, and saw Hendrix play a number of times and stuff. So, yeah, but LA was a very fertile ground musically. There was a lot of stuff both going on live, and then with collecting records and what my parents had and all that. So I was exposed to a tremendous amount of music, and I'm forever grateful of that, because it's really helped me have the career that I've had.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you had a really wonderful career. And what do you consider your favorite albums of all time? It's like, growing up and now and everything. What do you consider some of your favorite albums? You give me like 3, 5, whatever it is, and the ones that that really influenced you.
God, well, let me give some thought to that.
Take your time. Take your time.
It's hard sometimes to pull like all the stuff like runs through my mind, but I go, what the hell was that album called? What was that? I'm blanking here. I could talk about this, stuff I've worked on, but the stuff I listened to as a youth growing up. I mean, I was a huge Gershwin fan, and Aaron Copland. So I mean, Appalachian Spring, and certainly Rhapsody in Blue and Concerto in F, any of the Gershwin stuff. But I'm trying to visualize my parents' record collection right now, and at this age, visualizing anything becomes a challenge. It's sorry to say.
And of course, you can take your time if you want to throw them in. That's fine too. And I was just thinking about some of the jazz as well too. And if you listen to jazz, and the question I often ask is, what are your thoughts on "Bitches Brew" by Miles Davis? That has to be the ultimate standard.
Well, it certainly is one of the great standards of that whole period. But there was, also, people like Jimmy Smith and Thelonious Monk. I mean, I was a huge jazz fan, and I had we had albums by Ray Brown and Mingus and Red Callender. So I was there was a lot of exposure. McCoy Tyner. Jesus, suddenly I jumped into the Wayback Machine. Sherman and I are heading back there now.
Okay, Mr. Peabody, take your time.
Exactly. Those were such great cartoons. God,
I love those. And of course, some great music came out of them too. Oh my gosh. It's like, that was like you're learning right there too.
Well, I'll tell you too, when you really look back at like the people like Carl Stalling, who did all of the classical Warner Brothers cartoons, the music in those was staggering. I mean, in complexity and emotion for what they did. There's recordings of those recording sessions that are just amazing, and you're hearing this absolute cacophony taking place. And then he stops and he goes, the oboe in bar 43, that's supposed to be a B flat. And you go, how the hell did you hear that? I mean, this is like, it's, there's Bugs Bunny running across the screen, being chased by Elmer Fudd. And it's like, it's crazy. But there's, so many different areas of music that are so, so wonderful.
And I can imagine Foghorn Leghorn is boy, that's a B flat, not a B sharp. And I said, boy, you play that again, boy, and don't make me take my medication, boy.
Excuse me, you chicken hawk over there on the bassoon. Those were such great stuff. And certainly, then you suddenly go back and you say, Mel Blanc. Give me a break. I mean, what an amazing voice person he was. God.
Oh, I mean,
it's incredible.
I mean, he did what, 2,000 voices or something to his credit? Or is it 3?
Yeah,
it's like
at least.
Something too, talking about Mel Blanc. My son Sean sent me a thing on YouTube, or Mel Blanc was on the Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson goes, is that really you, or are you imitating someone? Mel Blanc goes, no, that is me. And he was just having fun with Johnny Carson. He's trying to tell him, yeah, this is me. I mean,
well, yeah. How do you find you in all of those personalities? He's like Sybil taken to the highest power.
Sybil to the highest power. I like that. Oh my!
Amazing cat.
Oh man, I'll tell you. We were talking about Carl Stalling, all the things going on in Warner Brothers. It also made me think too. When I watch Warner Brothers, all these little captions like saying, "Oh, this guy's really a dodo," or "Whoever wrote this must have been drinking too much." They just do little barbs, and this is all the stuff that goes on like behind the scenes and just taking jabs, at like say Fritz Freleng, Carl Stalling, Mel Blanc, or whoever's behind the scenes at Warner Brothers, or maybe like the bottom totem pole, animator, whatever it is. It's like they're just going back and forth with that stuff. But nowadays, it's like, one little barb, you probably get fired. But I'm sure they had a lot of fun at Warner Brothers. I look back, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like you see what Warner Brothers does. It's like their peak, I'll tell you. So.
Yeah, well, the thing that was so beautiful about so much of that stuff, and like we were kind of joking around with like the Bullwinkle period and all that, is so much double entendre. What they said, where like little kids were laughing at one thing and adults were going, did he really just say that? I mean, you were seeing the other side of like, this line that just came out, and it worked for both. So they were amazingly creative people. It was certainly, a factory I mean, they were cranking out so much stuff. When I was growing up, our next door neighbor, the guy's name was Bob Bentley. I hadn't even thought about him in probably 60 years.
Oh my gosh.
But he worked for Walter Lantz.
Woody Woodpecker, yes, my favorite. Oh my gosh, yes.
But I used to see his trash cans out there on trash day, and they were filled with all of the gels, all the cartoons that they had done. And I'm thinking, at this point, there was probably $1 million worth of that stuff in today's market that was just going out to the trash for all the cells that he was dumping. And because they didn't think of them as being worth anything, and they didn't recycle them or anything like that, so they just would go out. He'd bring them home and toss them in the can. And and now I go back in the Wayback Machine and grab a couple of boxes of those, and you could retire on that. It's amazing how things have changed.
And it's amazing too. I mean, I can imagine myself going over there and getting hold of a Woody Woodpecker error, but then it's like that can probably run $1 million on Amazon, eBay, or say with Jay-Z or whoever's rich out there, or even Jeff Bezos could probably buy that thing for $1 billion. It's no problem, and they'll try to resell it. But I also thought about too, like we talked about Bullwinkle and Jay Ward. I mean, I remember watching as a kid too, and I just laugh at all the stupid stuff, Bullwinkle getting blown up, or Natasha bonking Boris on the head, or Rocky just like banging into a tree. That was the only thing I understood, but I didn't catch all the dialogue. It's like blah blah blah, and I thought, oh, cute, like that. So,
I remember there was a racetrack, and they were having a race idea, but as a grown up, you suddenly went, oh, this is so crazy, and I love that the creative process was running on multiple levels. Oh, in the same way, like Mr. Rogers he loved having like jazz musicians on his show, so it was this child educational moment. But he was educating them on very adult levels too, which was really amazing, pretty remarkable especially for the time.
And I think we need another Mr. Rogers also. I remember I watching that movie when Tom Hanks started it, and I looked back and went, that guy was just amazing. Y'all brought in people, and of course, all these barriers that you never ever talk about. Let's talk about how you met up with James Taylor, and You pretty much got your the ball rolling in terms of the bass.
Yeah. Well, in the late '60s, I was still in college at this point, and I was in a band in Los Angeles called Wolfgang, and we were managed by Bill Graham, whose real name was Wolfgang, and we named our band after our manager, which we thought was a really good suck up kind of a thing to do, and our drummer was English. We had two English members in the group. One guitarist named Bryn Howarth, who still works in England. He became an evangelical musician and has a ministry over there, and he's done really beautiful work over there in England. And our drummer, his name was Warren Pemberton, but his nickname was Bugs, and he worked with Jackie Lomax, who had a group called Jackie Lomax and the Undertakers that were kind of rivals to the Beatles at the time, back in that period of the 60s. But he came over and we had this band together. And one of Bugs's friends was a guy named John Fishback. And John Fishback owned a studio in Los Angeles called Crystal Recording Studios. And he did like Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. And he did all of the early Stevie Wonder stuff. And he would come and hang out at our rehearsals. And one day he came to one of the rehearsals with a friend of his, and it turned out to be James Taylor. And James had just come back from England when he had done his first Apple album. And they had come to Los Angeles and done the Sweet Baby James album. And so he was hanging out with us for a couple of days, and we hit it off great. And that was it. I didn't think anything of it. And I was, still in the middle of like finals and all that in school. and James got offered a gig at the Troubadour in Los Angeles, and they had the band at that point was Danny Korchmar and Russ Kunkel, and Carole King was the piano player.
Oh wow!
And they needed a bass player, and Peter Escher was producing and managing him from Peter and Gordon. And he said to Peter, he said, I heard this bass player, you got to call him. And they tracked me down, and I ended up doing this gig, which I thought was going to be one gig. And 50 plus years later, I'm basically still on the gig. So it was a complete perfect storm of opportunity, of him having come because of a friend of our drummer and meeting him at that point, and then him also being James Taylor, who was really destined to change the music scene at that time. As this entirely new singer-songwriter movement came in, there were several things happened. I mean, we got hired to work with him, and Peter Asher insisted when we did, I think Mudslide Slim was the first album we all did together. It's either that or One Man Dog. I don't remember offhand. But Peter insisted that our names appear on the album jacket, which really had never been done before that. When you're looking at the Wrecking Crew, who were the studio players previous to us that were dominating the scene, their names were never on records. So nobody realized when they were listening to Frank Sinatra, the Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, and the Association, whatever, it was all the same musicians on all those records. So when people started, signing singer-songwriters, they would look at James Taylor's albums as kind of the benchmark of what they should be like. And they would look at them and see our names on it. And they go, well, they're doing pretty good with James. Let's get him on this project. So that's when I started working with people like Jackson Browne and Linda Ronstadt and that entire movement. And then it, evolved into like the Warren Zevons and, the Andrew Golds and all of that. So it was a unique run that was kind of not anticipated or premeditated. When we started working in the studio, we really had no studio experience and had to really learn every day what the studio was really requiring of us and how you did it. But it was a fertile time from the beginning of the 70s. The studios were going around the clock. There were so many artists being signed, and we were really fortunate and blessed to be the guys that kind of, rose to the forefront of that, and that it's never let up. It's been busy for all these decades, and I feel so fortunate at this point. I mean, it's tough right now through the pandemic, but that's an exception to the rules. This is an anomaly that no one expected to be confronted by.
Right. And of course, you look for things to do as well, too. We'll talk about some of your projects as well, too. You guys later became known as a section and later the immediate family, especially with the section with Asylum Records. And you think about it, that was definitely very, very special. And I mean, how many artists have come in and played with you guys? What was it from 72 to 77? It's like, how many were there?
Oh, there was so many. It was an amazing period. And what really happened with that was, we were James Taylor's opening act. We were his band at that point, and the band was comprised of Russ Kunkel, Danny Korchmar, myself, and Carole King. And we kept encouraging Carole to do some of her songs because nobody really knew who Carole was, but they knew who Goffin and King were, which was one of the great songwriting teams of the late 60s. And she was having massive hits like The Locomotion when she was a teenager. So we were encouraging her to perform some of her songs at the beginning of the show. And the next thing you know, she's in the studio and records Tapestry. Yeah, so
one of my favorites. My goodness.
Oh, yes. She's gone from a side person in a band to having one of the biggest records in the world at that point. So it was time for her to leave the group and pursue her solo career. And I was in the studio doing an album with Tom Jans and Mimi Farina. And Mimi Farina was Joan Baez's younger sister. And we were doing this album at A&M Records. And there was a keyboard player on that named Craig Durgee. Actually, it was James Taylor who said, look, you guys were dubs. And Cooch had hooked up with another guy in Los Angeles who I had done his album and a bunch of gigs with named Steve Postel. So we finished the album, and then we went to Japan to tour it. And Cooch came up with the name The Immediate Family because he said, look, this is my immediate family, is all you guys. and it seemed to be a perfect fit. So the Japanese album that we did was called Danny Korchmar and the Immediate Family.
Wow.
But now we're signed with Quarto Valley Records out here in California, and it's a band now, so it's just called the Immediate Family. And we finished it. We've got a new album coming out early in next year, and lots of things going on. And Denny Tedesco, who made the movie The Wrecking Crew, is doing a movie about us right now. And everything is like gone into slow motion because of the pandemic. We had a tremendous amount of momentum going, and it's still going on, but it's at a different pace because so many things are requiring, being safe. And so, gathering, and there's a ton of interviews in the can for the documentary and stuff. But I'm having the time of my life. I'm with my brothers, who I've loved for a half a century, playing with, and we are now the act rather than being the guys backing the act. So it's a pretty cool time right now. I mean, with all the grief in the world, I feel very fortunate that I have this vehicle to emotionally vent through musically.
That is one heck of a story, I'll tell you that. And of course, you worked with Phil Collins, Toto, and I'm going to throw some names out there. And let's talk about Phil Collins first of all. What's it like working with Phil Collins? He's one of my favorites, by the way.
I absolutely love Phil Collins. And Phil Collins and I met doing a Lee Ritenour record back in, I think, around 1980. Mm-hmm. And we hit it off, and Phil asked me if I could do his next tour, which was going to be for Face Value. And I said, man, I'm already booked with James Taylor. I can't do it. But I said, I'd love to work with you someday. So if there's any chance. And he called me to come over to England in 1984 to do his No Jacket Required album. And then we spent all of 85 on the road promoting that. But the thing that was so strange about that experience was that when we started the tour, he was still not really that well known. I mean, he was known as the drummer in Genesis, but not as a solo artist. And then Susudio got released as a single, and it just blew the top off of everything. And suddenly these theaters that we were going to be playing turned into arenas, and they had to change the whole direction of the tour. And it was amazing to be, there at Phil's side watching this kind of meteoric thing happen to his career. And then, we were fortunate that we continued on and did the But Serious album, and did the Sirius tour in 90. We did the But Sirius album in 89, and then did that tour, which was almost a solid year on the road. And then we kind of parted ways through the 90s, and then rehooked up back in the early 2000 to do the first Final Farewell tour. And then he retired, and we thought he was going to be retired forever. And then a couple of years ago, they called and said that he wants to hit the road again. And we did the Not Dead Yet tour. And so that we just finished almost 2.5 years on the road, off and on. And a few different, the most dramatic personnel thing in it was his son, Nicholas, who when we started the tour was 16 years old, became the drummer. And
wow.
He's a monster. He's so good. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the DNA got passed on from Phil to Nick, and Nick's, I think, probably 19 now, and
wow.
one of the most wonderful young men you'd ever want to know, and a great musician. So I have great hopes for his future. But it was a trip being on stage with Phil, and Phil would turn around and look, and there's his son playing drums behind him, carrying. And we were doing like coliseums and stuff. So we were doing like 60, 70,000 seaters. Mm-hmm. And Nick was out there killing it every night. So I'm really, really proud of him. But Phil is a really a gifted guy on so many levels. He's a really fine songwriter. He can play good keyboards. He's one of the best drummers ever. playing drums, playing bass with him as a drummer is one of the easiest fits I've ever had in my life. Plus, he's a really fine actor.
Mm-hmm.
If people ever get a chance to see Buster, about the great train robbery in England.
Yes, that was a really good
Buster,
one. I loved it. Yes, I love that one. Buster was great. Yes,
he was great in that. But he's a really kind of one of those Renaissance guys that kind of whatever he tackles, he really does a pretty great job on. And he's going through right now a whole bunch of personal issues that have been in the press, certainly out here and stuff. But as a musician, I really can't think of anybody I've ever worked with that I would consider better than Phil.
Mm-hmm.
He's right at the top of the food chain.
I would say so. And of course, when you mentioned about Phil,
exactly, it's exactly it. But people start to think when they haven't seen you in a while, is this guy even still around? And then they just thought it was the perfect title for. And I think that was his book that he did too. Is called Not Dead Yet.
Mm-hmm. And of course, another legendary group you also play with, Toto as well too. And early days, it was just all studio musicians just coming together. And tell us what's it like playing with Toto.
Well, I'd known all the guys since before they formed Toto. Steve Lukather, I did some of Lukather's very first sessions when he started getting into the studio scene, and he was about 19 years old at the time. And I knew David Page, something like that. They were on the road in Dubai Jazz Festival and we were out for many months, and that's when we recorded the Falling in Between live album. And it was a great lineup with Greg Fillinganes on keyboards and Tony Spinner playing guitar, Lukather playing guitar, Simon Phillips on drums, and myself and Bobby Kimball singing. Then a few years later, they called me and asked me if I would come back with them again, because after that tour ended, I had other obligations, so I couldn't go on the next year with them. And so they called me back, and I went back with them. But this was with Shannon Forrest on drums, and Joe Williams was singing, and Steve Porcaro and David Page and Lenny Castro and Steve Lukather and Mavuto and Jenny were the two background singers. So it was interesting to really go out with these guys with two completely different lineups, and I loved it. I wish I could have gone on with them again, but I had suddenly, when we finished the last tour with them, that's when Phil started. And so I had to bail on him at that point. So it's like a tragedy of riches. You'd love to be cloned and be able to do everybody. But you have to, your word is your bond, and I was already committed to other things. So that was it. But I love playing with the guys. They have a great book musically. They have so many great songs. And, Lukather, is still one of the greatest guitar players around. He's always been just a monstrous musician. And all the guys in the group were too. So I feel very fortunate that I had a couple of stints with these amazing guys.
Mm-hmm. Very amazing.
And girls.
And girls, yes. And speaking of girls, you also play with Dolly Parton and Linda Ronstadt as well, too. You can tell us about what's it like working with those two legends.
It was the trio when we did that. Like, I had worked with Dolly. I didn't play on 9 to 5, but I did all the other songs on the 9 to 5 album. And did a couple of albums with her, and then ended up in the movie Rhinestone with she and Sylvester Stallone. She asked me to come and be in that, so I was in the Rhinestone band. But so I had worked with Dolly. I had done a lot of work with Linda Ronstadt, and I had worked with Emmylou Harris. So when they put the trio together, the three of them, it was a great opportunity to work with all of them at one time, and I really felt really fortunate to do that gig, because they're three of the best singers in their selective fields, and certainly totally miss Linda at this point. She's one of the greatest singers of the generation. Mm-hmm. And Parkinson's it's a real cruel thing, and taking her voice that was so beloved.
And of course, we all feel for her as well too. And you also worked with we got a lot here, I'll tell you. So we got worked with Cliff Richard for a little bit. You worked with Neil Sedaka and Vince Gill too. Believe it or not, Yvonne Elliman and Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Well, Crosby and Nash, and maybe just tell a little bit. And if you want to throw somebody in there that I haven't mentioned, feel free.
Well, one of my favorite albums I ever worked on, and most people don't even realize that in that genre that I did it, was Spectrum with Billy Cobham, which is still considered one of the quintessential rock fusion, jazz fusion albums of the early 70s. And there's a song called Stratus on it that the whole bass and drum part was lifted. Oh God, what was it? I'm blanking right now on the name of the group. Well, whatever. That was a remarkable project. And one of the things that was fun about it was when we had the section together, we went on the road opening for this group Mahavishnu Orchestra, which was John McLaughlin and company. And I got to know Billy Cobham, who was the drummer in Mahavishnu Orchestra, through that tour. And then he asked me if I would come to New York and do his solo album. And it was going to be he and Jan Hammer, who was the keyboard player in Mahavishnu. But when I arrived at the studio, Tommy Bolin was the guitar player on it. And when I was in Wolfgang, Tommy was in a group called Zephyr. Wow. And we were both managed by the same managerial team and had done stuff together. And we were really good friends. And I had no idea he was going to be doing Billy's record. So it was a real thrill to walk in the studio and see Tommy. And we basically did almost the entire album in 2 days.
Wow.
It's like first and second takes. And anywhere I go in the world, like Jeff Beck, whenever I see Jeff Beck, he runs up to me and just points at me and he goes, Spectrum, Stratus.
Spectrum, Stratus.
He said that album changed his whole outlook on how to play guitar.
Wow.
So it's deep. It's a deep thing. So that's one of the things we hadn't mentioned that I'm profoundly proud of. But, all the people, I did Evergreen with Barbara Streisand, and I did the theme to Mahogany with Diana Ross, and worked with Andy Williams and Andy Griffith, did Bury Christian Movement. And so I've really tried to kind of cross-pollinate as many genres as I can, because I really enjoy the variety of work. I do hip hop and country and blues and metal and just whatever you get called for, you go in and you make it work. It's a challenge every day.
And of course, speaking of cross-pollinating, it's not just music in general. You also done some film and TV soundtracks. You did Legally Blonde, Metropolis, and of course Dr. Detroit, and you also had all played on Hill Street Blues, that classic TV show, Night Riders, Simon and Simon, and also The Prince of Egypt. And you can just
band called Group Therapy. And then we went on to do the shows like L.A. Law and Hill Street Blues, the A-Teams. There were so many shows. Hunter, the list goes on and on. 10 Speed and Brown Shoes, and so it was an amazing period with Mike because they were cranking these shows out like a factory. We were working every day on these, and then through all of that stuff came, I got to know all of the film composers. So I was doing, movies with Elmer Bernstein and Jerry Goldsmith and Alan Silvestri. And I love doing those because it kept my reading chops up, because having come from classical piano, I was a really strong reader most of my life. And then through the 70s, there wasn't that much of a demand for reading. It was mostly you just went in and made up parts for the singers and songwriters. So it was great to get back into TV and film, because suddenly I was just looking at pages and pages of notes, and it got my reading chops back up. And I try to maintain that, because you never know what you're going to get called for. You show up at the studio, there could be no music. There could be incredibly intricate music that you have to read. There's the Nashville number chart system, or you get just chords and stuff. So the demand is really high. I mean, the end result is always joyous, but the process can be really difficult and hard and very demanding. Even though people go, "Well, you guys are just playing music," it goes a lot deeper than that.
I'm sure it goes a lot deeper too, and also you put in so much hard work, but you also have some funny moments in the studio too. So maybe maybe you had some funny moments with one of your favorite people, maybe like the most hilarious you probably ever had, or maybe something that just, something strange or whatever it was. It's like, what would you say probably the most hilarious that just, stood out for you?
Oh boy, let me think about that. Well, actually, I mean, it's a little bit on the funky side, but if you're good with it with your audience,
oh, definitely.
Okay, I was doing an album with Debbie Boone, and Debbie's really such a sweet, delightful girl, and really a good singer, and just a darling woman. And we were in the studio working, and during one of the breaks, I was sitting and talking with her. And she was pregnant at the time and said, God, I've been dealing with a nutritionist and I've really had to change my diet and all this stuff and cut out all these sweets and stuff. So we were on our break and I walked by and there's a vending machine and I look in it and there's a package of Twinkies in it. So I buy the Twinkies and I take them in and I stick them on her music stand in her vocal booth. And there's a whole room full of guys in here. And so our break is over and she goes back in the vocal booth and she starts laughing and she goes, "Well, I know who put these here." And so she opens up the package of Twinkies and takes one of them and comes out into the studio and we're all sitting there getting ready to play. And she goes, what I always loved about Twinkies is you wrap your hand around that thing and you put your finger in that little hole and you pull out all that good white cream and then you just lick it off your finger. Man, all the music stands were tipping over. Guys were throwing shit everywhere, going crazy. I mean, the last girl we would have ever expected to pull off this kind of visual for us. But we still, every once in a while, I bump into her and we still laugh about it. She's really a good sport and really a fun girl. But there's, over the years, there's always been, the one thing you try to maintain in the recording studio is levity and fun. And it's a serious job and we all take it very seriously, but it's really plays best when there's humor and fun in the room. And so we're always looking for those little opportunities to do things. I did I think it was a Barbara Mandrell record down in Nashville, and the guitar player on it he was busy making phone calls and stuff when we ran the song, and the other players and we all kind of looked at each other and said, "It's really stupid of him not to be in the room." So what we did was we took his chart, and when it got to the bridge, we changed some of the chords on it, re-Xeroxed the machine, the copy. And so he comes in and we start recording and he's playing great all the way up to the bridge. And then all of a sudden there were these subtle changes and we were watching his face go through some serious contortions because he had no idea what had happened. And he was definitely not playing the right parts or anything. And, and then he finally looked at us and we were all laughing our heads off. So, there's always going to be, funny, moments. But the thing is when that red light comes on, everybody's deadly serious about what they do. And it's, when you're in the studio for a day, it's an expensive proposition. Studios are expensive. Musicians cost, a chunk of dough to fill a room full of musicians for a day. So at the end of the day, it's not like some jobs where if like you were, redoing an engine block and you weren't feeling good that day, you kind of thought, well, man, I'll just finish it up tomorrow. I'm going to go home now. In the music business, you can't. You have to leave that day with a finished piece of work. And you come in every day to a blank canvas and they want to see a masterpiece, if possible, on that. At the end of the day, you don't have the luxury of coming back the next day. I mean, sometimes you're booked for multiple days, but still rarely would the pressure's on all the time to perform and create, which is part of the thing that's terrifying about the job and part of the thing that's the most exhilarating about the job.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I can imagine with you working with Frank Sinatra, because there was some something I read too where he'll go maybe a couple hours and say, I'm not feeling it, send everybody home, they get paid. But then he'll go in almost like 24 hours, and then he'll go to a restaurant and just have some coffee and just close the place down. So
yeah. I mean, they're all unique characters. I remember getting called to do a project at A&M Records once, and they wouldn't tell us who the artist was that I've worked on with somebody, and I play bass to it, with the bass part being featured on top of it so they can hear it. But I also tell stories about the process and all kinds of different experiences. And kind of it just keeps growing weekly. I'm up to about going on 140,000 people on the channel right now.
Wow! And
I started a clubhouse on it that I do 2 live streams a month, and then once a month I do one-on-one Skype or FaceTimes with people for about 10 to 15 minutes. And so it's been really this kind of an accident, and it's really low tech, and everybody keeps saying, don't change a thing, because some people say, oh, we can get you a better mixer and mics and stuff. And I'm like sitting there in the peanut gallery with this kind of really low tech, goofy podcast or YouTube thing. But it's really made me feel viable and engaged. And the people who have really logged into this thing are really dedicated to it. And we're really all like, this is my second immediate family with all the people that are on this channel. We just did a live stream yesterday, and it's so much fun. And I do about 2.5 hour live stream with them. And I really enjoy it. So that's been going on and this is because of COVID, because I had time to do something that my year was booked up through February of next year, pretty solid with work, a lot of it overseas. And in an instant, it all disappeared. And I sat there and I went, what the hell am I going to do now? So I've got the YouTube channel going, and then we're just finishing, I've never had a website before, so we're finishing the website because I just did a book that I never thought I would get around to doing, and it's a photo book. It's about 6,000 pictures of people giving me the finger. I'm
not one of them. I'll tell you that. I'm not one of them. I really enjoy it. Do not expect the middle finger from me. Trust me.
Well, the book's going to be the title of the book is Everybody Loves Me, and it's being printed right now. And I'll be taking. I'm going to open up the website probably next week for pre-sales on it, and I'll have the books by the end of November, and they'll be in people's hands by the holidays. And I wanted to have something that was just fun. And this whole thing with the fingers started as a complete accident, where when I was on the road with Phil Collins in 2004, I had a bass tech named Steve Winstead. His nickname was Chinner. And so they hired me, a bass tech, and I'd never really used a bass tech before. I always did my own gear. So I really didn't have much for him to do, and we were going to be on the road for like a year. And he ended up becoming like a general gopher for everybody. He was, it helped the singers and all that stuff and percussion. But I had minimal needs, so we would joke about that all the time, because I think when he came on the tour, he had come off of some tour where bass player had like 10 basses and wanted new strings every night and worked him to the bone. And suddenly he comes in overqualified, and I'm saying, I really don't need anything. So at the end of the tour, though, there was word that Phil was going to retire. And I thought we had about 100 with band and crew. There's probably 120 people on the road. And I thought I may never see a lot of these people again. They were from Europe and all over the States. So I decided I was going to take pictures of everybody and make a little folder in my computer just for myself. And the first guy I walk up to is Chinner, and he's sitting at his laptop. And I said, hey, Chinner, give me a smile. And he gives me the finger instead.
He loves you.
Yeah. And I looked at that and I went, well, actually, this is pretty cool. So I went and got Phil to give me the finger, his manager, everybody in the band, all the crew guys, truck drivers, bus drivers, caterers, everybody. And I had, probably 150 50 pictures, and I put it away like I intended to. And then when I went out with Toto a couple of years later, I did the same thing. And it started to take on a life of its own. And I've got in my computer, I've got over 12,000 pictures of people. And it's everybody from like Jack Nicholson to Gwyneth Paltrow to Jack Black to Bernie Williams from the New York Yankees to all the musicians you could imagine. And plus just the average people on the streets, cops and nuns, and we've put together this really beautiful coffee table book that's about 300 pages of thematic pictures of people flipping me off. And I'm really
I can
excited
imagine
about it.
I can imagine nuns. Heaven help us.
Oh, it's great. It's great. And the nun who I have in there, she said, look, I was a high school principal. She says, this doesn't bother me at all. It's like, yeah. So, it's one of these things that another thing that if it hadn't been for the pandemic, I would have never done this, even though people have, said to me for years, are you ever going to do that book? Because, they all, so many people have kind of honored me with their finger. And the thing is, when I'm looking at this, there's like a finite amount of ways of giving the finger, probably really about 5 or 6 ways of actually doing it. But the faces, when they do it, are infinite. And that's what I really focus on, is the things from just the expressions on people's face when they're doing it. It's pretty classic. But the thing that I love the most is everybody who's seen any of these pictures, they always smile. They always think it's fun. And that's what I think we need in this world right now is good music, good art, good fun, because it's so depressing every day to wake up and see the death counts and the suffering that so much of our society globally is going through. And certainly in this country, people that are really living on the very edge at this point of subsistence because they're not being helped, and all their jobs, their businesses have all gone down the tubes. So it's a scary time. So I really wanted to have something that people could maybe just take some time and sit and look and put a smile on their face.
And you do a great job at it as well, too, Leland. And what's the name of the book again?
The book is going to be called Everybody Loves Me, and the website to go to, which it will be up soon, but you can go there now, or at least mark it. I tried to get lelandsklar.com or leesklar.com, and they've both been somebody owns them, and they want lots of money to,
oh my gosh,
to give them up. So we just said the hell with it. So my website is going to be called Leland Sklar's Beard.
That's a good one. I remember that, and I think we touched upon your YouTube channel and also your podcast as well too. And I'm trying to think. We had so much fun. Did we talk about your new podcast, or should we just?
Well, I don't actually have a podcast. It's really just the YouTube channel and Facebook are where I'm really the most focused. And I have some stuff on Instagram. I don't do Twitter. I have a Twitter account, but I'm way too long-winded for that short. I can't be that succinct in my talking.
Oh my gosh!
So, and I'm gonna really expand the website that I'm gonna be doing. We've scanned them really high scanning, and I'm gonna have those like limited edition runs of drawings and things like that in the gift shop, and we're working on some other things to put in there just to make it really fun and interactive. Because I'm working with a guy named Blue, who's really gifted at doing books, and he's been working with me on this, doing all the layouts and stuff. And he's got so many great ideas, and I'm jumping into all of them like just head first. It's really fun, but it's going to be a real interactive, fun web page, I think, when we get it finished. So, but we're hopefully about a week from launching it and start. And I'm going to have real nice perks for anybody that comes in, like in the first 10 days and orders books. So I'll have all that stuff posted in there. So I'm having a great time. I mean, my heart breaks for the suffering in the world, but I try to manage every day to do things that I feel are uplifting and positive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm working at.
And you're doing a great job of it as well, too. Once again, bass player and also worked over 2,000 albums, Leland Sklar and the Mike Wagner Show. Just a few more minutes here. I love to have you on longer, but I'm sure your phone's going off and goes, hey, Leland, play a song for Phil or play a song for James, whatever. But
no, I'm totally thrilled to be with you, Mike. I think your show's great, and anytime if you ever want me back, I would be thrilled to come back and hang with you.
Oh, definitely. And just a couple more things. Who do you consider biggest influence in your career, Leland?
Probably. I mean, I think the most dramatic effect on my career, and I would have to lump that as not necessarily an influence, but really had the deepest effect, would be James Taylor, because everything that really became my career began with him. And so I think if I would have to say, I'm going to give you three people who really had the biggest influence in my life. James Taylor, Peter Asher, who managed him and really guided all of us through our careers through this, and my junior high and high school music teacher, Mr. Theodore Lynn, who brought me to the bass and got me started on everything. And he was a powerful influence on me.
Mm-hmm. And that's very amazing, too. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point, Leland?
Just enjoy life. Life is really, it's really short. You know, I never thought I would be this age. When I started, where I am now looked like an eternity away. So try to enjoy as much of it as you can, while you can.
Mm-hmm. And we certainly will. Once again, bass player Leland Sklar here on the Mike Wagner Show, Hall of Fame, done over 2,000 albums to his credit. Leland, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to hearing soon. He's also got a new book coming out soon called Everybody Loves Me. You can check out his YouTube channel. And once again, tell us about your upcoming projects. What's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people just check you out?
Well, what I would really love people to do is, especially on YouTube, our group, The Immediate Family, please go to our page on YouTube and subscribe. We've got this Friday, our EP is coming out, and on Saturday we're going to have a streamed concert. And if anybody wants to see, it'll be over, I would imagine, by the time you're airing the show, because it's this Saturday. But check out The Immediate Family. This is really the most important thing in my life right now, is being in this band with my dear brothers in crime. So that, and come visit me on YouTube and Facebook, and also, but come to the YouTube channel for both the band and my YouTube channel, and subscribe and hang out. We're having the best time there. It's a real wonderful communities are evolving there, and we're real responsive to fans. I've always loved fans and try to interact as much as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's very fantastic. Once again, Leland, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Learned a lot from you, and I think I'd like to come and hang with you a few days and talk more, and looking forward to having again soon. Do us a favor, keep us up to date. We love you to have back on 2021 and beyond. And yes, a pseudo middle finger. Yeah, we love you. Just keep in touch. And yeah,
Mike, you're my hero, Mike.
The Mike Wagner Show is powered by Sonic Web Studios. If you're looking to start or upgrade your online presence, visit www.sonicwebstudios.com for all of your online needs. Sonic Web Studios specializes in custom web design, app development, social networking, search engine optimization, domain registration, email marketing, online stores, and more. Since our birth, we have been designing and developing immaculate websites and providing web solutions which are a cut above the rest. As a leading web designing enterprise, we have a team of extremely talented web designers who are well-focused and have the experience of working on multiple web developing platforms such as PHP, Magento, custom WordPress, and more. Sonic Web Studios has been helping businesses of all kinds, whether big, small, established, or startup, impress their audiences with exemplary web solutions. We don't just create beautiful and functional websites. We give you a complete online solution with the main goal of enhancing your yearly revenues. We aim to give your business business the online exposure and brand acknowledgement that will help you in achieving increased conversions leading to profitable sales. Call 1-800-303-3960 or visit us online at www.sonicwebstudios.com to get started today. Mention the Mike Wagner Show and get 20% off your project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level.
Thanks for listening to the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and themikewagnershow.com. Please support our program with your donations at themikewagnershow.com. Join us again next time for another great episode of The Mike Wagner Show.